Hello everybody, this is Ed puzzle number 34 and we're continuing with the quadratic formula, but this video we're talking about simplifying radicals and I'll show you what I'm talking about right here. So for example, these what I'm going to show you, please copy, you have to remember these, you have to memorize these. What we're doing now is the same thing we've done before but without a calculator. So you need to memorize these. These right here are the perfect square roots. You must memorize them. So please copy and start memorizing if you don't already know them. Okay, at least memorize the first 10. So when we have a square root, that means that two numbers, the same number, are multiplied by themselves, a times a. And so that means you have a squared. And so when you have a squared, you can simplify that to just a. That means that it can come out of the square root and just be a. So for all of these, they're perfect because I can simplify them all. Because the square root of 1 is 1. That means 1 times 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2 because 2 times 2 is 4. And so forth. So that's why you have to memorize. These are the perfect squares. Okay, so memorize those. Now, what we're going to talk about is what happens when it's not on this list. That's what we are going to focus on today because you'll see those type of questions on different kinds of tests. And if you're not allowed to use a calculator, that's what we're using this for. And on TSI, you can't use a calculator. So that's why we're going to focus on what happens when you don't have something on this list. We're going to simplify. So, for example, let's talk about the square root of 75. So 75 is not on this list. So what you don't do is okay, if it's not on the list, what do? What you do is you're going to break down 75 into one of the square roots, the perfect square roots. So on this list, what can I divide 75 by? If I divide it by 1, I'm just going to get 75. Can't divide it by 4 evenly. I can't divide it by 9 evenly. Can't divide it by 16 evenly. But I can divide it into 25 evenly because 25 times 3 is 75. So I'm rewriting it. I'm divided by one of the perfect squares, which was 25. Now I can simplify this. The square root of 25 is 5. So this can come outside the square root, not as 25, but as 5 because the square root of 25 is 5. So my answer is 5 square root of 3. The 3 stays inside because I cannot take the square root of 3. It's not a perfect square. So that is my answer. 5 square root of 3 is how I simplify square root of 75. Okay, and that's what happens when you don't have a calculator. So we're going to do a couple of examples, and then you're going to have to use a quadratic formula, because remember we have this in the quadratic formula. All right, let's do another example. What about the square root of 48? So 48 is not on this list. Okay, I can divide it by 4. I can divide it by 9. I cannot divide by 9, and I can divide it by 16. Because 16 is bigger, it's going to save me more time if I choose 16. So I can divide this by 16. 16 times 3 is 48. And all I did was divide. I just divided 16 by 48 by 16. I got 3. So just like the other one, the square root of 16 is 4. So when this comes out, what does it come out as? 4 or 16? The 4, because the square root of 16 is 4. So my answer is 4 square root of 3. Okay, that is how I simplify that. All right, let's try another one. What if you have 200? Okay, so which one on this list can I divide by 200? I want to pick the biggest one because that's going to save me space. So which one on this list can I divide by 200? I can divide 200 by 100. So I'm going to simplify that because 200 divided by 100 is 2. So that's how I simplify that. Okay, so when I reduce the 100, what does it come out as? 10 or 100? 10. So my answer is 10 square root of 2. Let's try another one. I hope you're getting the hang of it. You're dividing whatever they tell you the square to simplify by the square root by one of these perfect squares. So 50, which one's the biggest on this list that I can divide it by? Should be 25. 25 times 2, when you take the square root, comes out as 5. So it's going to be 5. My answer is 5 square root of 2, because the 2, I can't simplify that anymore. Okay, now I would like for you to try one by yourself. What about this one? What is the biggest on this list that I can simplify by? The 4. So when this comes out, it's going to be, it comes out as a 2. Because we did square root of 4 times 15. So when that comes out as a 2, and what stays inside is 15. Can't simplify the 15, and that would be my answer. All right, so let me show you, those were practice so you can simplify the square root. But let's do some with the quadratic formula. All right. How am I with time, Stephanie? All right, so here is my equation, and now I'm going to find the A, B, and C. So my A is the one I circle, B is the one squiggly, no X is the one I underline, the C. So I have 1x squared. For B, it's -4 because it's the one with squiggly. It's what's in front. Don't leave off the negative because it's going to be wrong. All right, let's use our formula. If you haven't done Edpuzzle 33, I highly recommend doing that Edpuzzle first. Okay, so I changed the sign of B, so it's going to be 4 plus minus square root of parentheses, the -4 squared minus 4 times the A, which is 1, times the C, which is -1. All divided by 2 times the A, which is 1. Oh no. So here's what we're going to do. Hopefully my screen does not. Okay, and remember, because we're preparing for the TSI no calculator, what I would want you to do is I want you to do this without a calculator. So what we do is we're going to do the square root first, because that's going to be one of the first questions I ask you when you do the examples by yourself. You're going to tell me, what did you get for the square root? So you squared this one. -4 times -4 is 16. And then 4 times a 1 is 4. 4 times a -4 is a -1 is a -4. But you have that minus. The answer we got was -4. 16 minus a -4 equals a +20. So for the square root, I got 20. Okay. For the square root, I got 20. This is also going to be a very important number. We're going to talk about that. But for the square root, we got 20. Now, let me make sure. Okay, so you're going to get 20. Now, in the Edpuzzle, I'm going to ask you, what did you get for the square root? Also known as the discriminant. Don't be confused by that word. That just means the number when you, for whatever you get that goes inside the square root. Okay, so I got 20 for the discriminant. And that's what I'm just want to make sure everybody understands when they get that question. Okay, so that's what I'm going to ask you. Now, what you're going to do is you have to take the square root of this discriminant, this number. Okay, and I'm going to ask you to simplify. So to simplify 20, I get my list of perfect squares, and I see what can I divide 20 by? What's the biggest that I can divide it by? The biggest I can divide it by is the 4. So 4 times 5 is 20. When you take the square root of 4, it's 2. So my answer is 2 square root of 5. Okay, that's when I simplify. So I'm going to ask you for the discriminant, then I'm going to ask you to simplify the discriminant. So my final answer, and then I'm going to give you a multiple choice when you do this. It's going to be 4 plus or minus the square root of 2, square root of 5 over 2. Okay, so all of this is equal to 20, and then I simplified it to 2 square root of 5. So now I can divide everything by, this is the most simplified, since it's being divided by 2, I can divide the 4 by 2, and I can divide this by 2, and I get 1. So my final answer, okay, this is before you simplify. When you simplify, your answer is going to be 1 plus or minus the square root of, I'm going to put 1 just so everyone's clear, the square root of 5. Okay, you could take off the 1 and just leave it like 1 plus the square root of 5. And that is the most simplified reduced perfect answer. So again, what you're doing is you're using the formula. This is without a calculator. You're telling me the discriminant, you're simplifying the discriminant, and then you're putting it back in. All of this is really 2 square root of 5, and then you divide. So I'm going to ask you these 4 questions when you do the examples by yourself. The discriminant for you to simplify, finish the equation, and then simplify. Okay, so let's do another one. Seems like a lot of work, but everything seems like a lot of work until you do some practice. Okay, let's do another one. Okay, so we're going to do what we've done before. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Did I just do the... Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 divided 2 times a. Okay, so I'm going to figure out the ABC like we've been doing before. Trying to keep it short. No, how long have I been recording? Oh, I thought you were timing me. Oh. Okay, so my A is right here. I have one of them. My B squiggly is 6. My C is -9. All right, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this now in my equation. Yeah, I thought you were recording. Okay, so then negative b, I change the sign of b, so it's going to become a -6 plus or minus the square root of the 6 squared minus 4 times the a, which is 1, times the c, which is -9. All divided by 2 times the a, which is 1. Oh no, my document camera's frozen. Okay, here we go. No, it closed out of it. Oh my god, don't tell me I have to record the whole thing again. Okay, so then I'm going to do the discriminant first. So that means what's inside right here, the square root. So it's going to be 6 squared, which is 36, minus 4 times a 1 is 4. 4 times a -9 is -36. So negative and negative mean you add a positive. So that 36 plus 36 is 72. That, your discriminant, is 72. Okay, so that's going to be the first part. Now we're going to simplify this discriminant, 72. So I can divide 72 most evenly between 36 times 2. So that means that's what's inside the square root, 36 times 2. And so I can simplify that. I can take this 36 and that equals 6 times the square root of 2. So that would be how I simplify. That would be the answer to the second question. Now, I'm going to put it in all together into my formula. So instead of writing all of this, I'm going to write -6 plus or minus 6 times the square root of 2, all divided by 2 times 1 is 2. So that would be the answer to my third question that I'll ask you. And then now I'm going to simplify because I can divide everything by 2. I can divide this by 2 and get -36. This by 2 and get a +3. So my answer is -3 plus or minus 3 times the square root of 2. That would be my final, most simplified answer. So at some point this stopped and I don't know if it ended up recording or not. So we're about to find out.